6 candidates are in the running for 2 seats on Cupertino City Council. As part of the City Channel's ongoing coverage of this race toward Election Tuesday, you are about to see an up-close and personal introduction to one of those 6 candidates. This is Candidate Roundtable with tonight's featured City Council candidate, Mark Santoro.
Welcome to Candidate Roundtable. I'm Roberta Holloman, a member of the League of Women Voters of Cupertino Sunnyvale, and the moderator. With me are Crystal Liu from Silicon Valley Community Newspapers and Mei Wei Huang, who is the South Bay Bureau Chief of the World Journal, a Chinese language newspaper. Candidate today is Mark Santoro. Mark was born in 1957 in Miami, Florida. His family moved to California when Mark was 5. He was a member of the Boy Scouts of America, where, as leader, his patrol placed first in 3 straight camporees. Later, as the senior patrol leader of his entire troop, he became the chairman of the first all-boy-run camporee, an event that took 14 months to organize and hosted more than 500 scouts. A knee injury in high school forced Mark from pole vaulting and football into more academic pursuits. Working nights for a local newspaper, Mark put himself through school. He eventually earned a PhD in electrical engineering from Stanford University. Mark held design positions at several companies in the Bay Area, including Apple and Sun Microsystems, before starting his own company in January of 1995. Mark served as CEO until the sale of his company in December of 2000. Mark purchased some property in Cupertino in 2001, where he built the home that he, Sherry, their daughter Jennifer, and their dog and parrot now live. The experience of building a home taught him a lot about Cupertino government. He now wants to give something back to the city of Cupertino. Mr. Santoro, can you tell me what is the most important issue you see facing Cupertino in the near future?
I don't see, there's a lot of issues, but what I see is sort of an overriding issue. And what that is I believe that the people on the city council and the people who work for the city actually work for the voters. And I think that a big issue there is transparency in government. I think there's too many things that the citizens of Cupertino are not aware of. And I think, for me, I'd say the most important issue would be that part of its attitude, the city council's not up here talking down to people, they work for the people. And I believe that transparency also flows along with that as another important thing.
Yeah, we all agree that government should work for the people. And we all like this idea. But how are you going to do it when the people you serve have very different ideas and very divided?
I think that you need to listen to your constituents and understand what their issues are rather than just getting your information from one source. If you listen to one side of a problem from one group and you don't listen to another group, you're going to get a very, very different perspective on that. So I think as a council person, you need to not only listen to the staff that works for the city, but also listen to all of the people that are involved in an area with an issue. And if you just listen even to one group of people versus another, they have very different perspectives. And so I think the most important thing is to actually listen, understand what people's issues are, and then to try to make a fair assessment of that and try to do something that works as best as it can for everyone. And if you do something that a group of people doesn't like, you should be prepared to explain to them why you did something that they don't like.
In your campaign statement, you say that you're very concerned about the city's building codes. Would you please explain why you put such an emphasis on this issue?
I believe at the time I wrote my campaign statement, there were some various issues going with some neighborhoods that I thought were, some of the codes were problematic. And I think they were mostly problematic because they weren't addressing problems as a whole. There's sort of somebody complains about an issue, people tend to overreact, they put in a particular thing in the code, and then they go back and change it later. One example I gave is, I believe at one point there was a 35% second floor to first floor ratio. And most of the people in the city didn't like that idea. It was trying to address large homes, but it was doing it in kind of a strange way. And then you start forcing all the houses in Cupertino to look sort of like Mediterraneans with funky second floors. And I think that the people were against that, and then they went back and changed that and made it 45%. And so I think there's just a lot of things with the building codes and building going on in the city that could be better thought through. To me, it looks like, for example, condo projects kind of sometimes randomly spring up, and I'm not completely against building, but I think that people should think through where they want certain things to be built and how that affects everyone in the city.
Looks like you experienced dealing with the city government and the issues about the residential hillside ordinance. Looks like that's the key issue that triggered you to decide to run. The main issue.
I wouldn't exactly say that. I'd say that gave me a lot of experience dealing with the city, and a lot of that experience was good, by the way. There's some excellent people working for the city. What it taught me, though, was other people came to me and expressed other things that were going on throughout the city. And I believe sort of the common thread in all of that was really transparency in government. People don't know why certain things were happening, and I think they felt that they weren't being listened to by the council. And so that really got me more interested. But certainly that was a catalyst. That got me started looking at things with the city.
In your campaign statement, you say that the hillside standards are overly restrictive. What alternatives would you suggest to protect our hillside?
I don't think I was saying the hillside standards were overly restrictive. One of the things that happened is the council passed an overlay for residential properties, not for hillside properties. And that overlay was to take both hillside restrictions and R1 restrictions and overlay them. And I thought that was far too oppressive for sort of foothill style smaller lots. The hillside rules were written for much bigger lots. Those lots were typically smaller. They're not way up on big hills. They're not 5 to 10, 20 acre properties. A lot of them are 10,000 square feet or less. And so I thought they were overly restrictive to have an overlay for those properties. I do strongly believe in hillside protection. I believe that there should be a rule that applies to everyone, and it should be applied equally. Part of my problem with that process was about 500 properties that did have some restrictions on them had them removed, and a small number of properties had more restrictive restrictions. And I think that it should have been something more evenly handed across the board. So I'm not saying that I wasn't saying that the hillside restrictions on the hillside zone properties were too restrictive. I believe the overlay was too restrictive for the residential properties.
So what alternatives would you suggest to the overlay?
I believe in that case what the right thing to do would be to take and just have the R1 zoning and the hillside zoning. And the hillside zoning covers the hillside properties already. I think there's a few things that could be put in the hillsides that are actually slightly more restrictive but would help views, such as screening retaining walls, which is not in the hillside ordinance today. And I also believe that with regards to the residential properties, you should just leave them all zoned R1, but then have some language if you're building on a slope that addresses that. And I think the right thing to do would be to form a committee in the city with a lot of the citizens and get together and look at things that they think are fair and just. And I think there's a lot of people who give that a lot of thought that would be willing to participate in that.
Mark, we know that you sold your company at the end of the year 2000, and you bought a piece of land and built your house here. I believe that by then you have many other choices, but you chose to move from Sunnyvale to here. What are the main reasons, and when are the moments when you really moved in Cupertino and you wake up in Cupertino and you tell yourself that I made the wrong decision? What are those moments?
Well, to answer the last question first, I don't think I ever woke up and said I made the wrong decision. So I think we made the right decision. So I think Cupertino is a wonderful town. If I thought I made the wrong decision, I wouldn't be running for city council. I would have just left Cupertino. Why did we choose Cupertino? We'd lived in Sunnyvale for a long time, and we were looking at moving, and we really liked Sunnyvale a lot, and we liked Cupertino a lot. and we were looking for something sort of in that area. And we also looked in other areas north and south of here, and we eventually found a piece of property in Cupertino that I really liked, and I liked it. It was pretty run down and weeds growing over it, and hadn't been lived in for a while. But it was a nice piece of property. We liked it, and so we chose it for partially that reason. But a big reason was really I was kind of narrowed down by Sherry. She likes Cupertino a lot. She likes the ethnic diversity. There's a lot of things to do in Cupertino. There's a lot of really good places to eat in Cupertino, stores to shop in, and so we just sort of liked the area. It's close to Sunnyvale that we lived in before, which I thought was also a wonderful city, and so wonderful location, great restaurants and things like that. Our daughter is old enough she can't take advantage of the schools, but it's also good to be in an area with good schools because we think the parents and the people in the community care more about their community, and so all of that kind of played in together.
And it's not too urbanized, no?
It's not too urbanized.
I mean now.
I wouldn't say so, no.
Well, in your campaign statement, you mentioned the creation of a downtown area. Actually, another candidate also claims so. So where would you like this downtown area to be?
I think that my main thing, that was part of looking at a vision, and it ties into what you build where. And I think that builders and developers are always going to take a certain view, and their view is going to be, how do I maximize the money on this piece of property? And capitalism works in the United States. It's not a bad thing. But rather than randomly let things show up, I think it's a good idea to do a little bit more planning in terms of what we want the city to look like. For example, do you think it's too urbanized? If the people in the city think it is, we should look into that. So one thing that off the top of my head I was thinking was a downtown area might give the city some character. I'd heard several people say that they thought that would be a good thing. And so I think the city does lack a little character. It is sort of spread out houses everywhere. There's not really a downtown area per se. And we sort of have a few landmarks like Apple that tie things down. But I think it would be nice to have an area where people can sort of sit outside, have a cup of coffee and meet and things like that. If we can't find a place or the voters aren't interested in that, then we shouldn't do it. But if a lot of people are, and so far I've heard a lot of people are, I think it would be a good thing to look into. Now you have to find a big enough piece of land in a reasonable location. There are some obvious locations to look at, such as down closer to City Hall off Stevens Creek, kind of in that area. There's potentially over by, there was the project proposed off Results Way, kind of, there's an older part of town over there off Stevens Creek. That area used to be kind of a downtown area for Cupertino, where people used to go and kind of gather and things. We could look at renewing that area and trying to kind of restore it, and maybe do that as part of whatever gets developed in Results Way. So that would be another place. Also over near Valco, there's a lot of development going on. That might be a reasonable place. I think it should be in a place where it's easy for people to get to, but it can be quiet enough that they can kind of, circulate and put some restaurants. Castro Street is an example of something. If you look 20 years ago, I think Mountain View was very much on seemed to be on a downward swing, and I think the downtown renewal project helped that city a lot. So it's a thought. If the people want it, then it should be looked into, I think. If not, then I think you should work for the people. And if they don't want it, you shouldn't do it.
To find out more information on this candidate and other candidates, go to the city website, cupertino.org. And you can also find more information at Smart Voter, the League of Women Voters nonpartisan website, smartvoter.org.
Mark, you single out a frustration I think that would be shared by quite a lot of people. That's the traffic problem, especially where the schools are at certain hours. I believe you gave some thoughts about it. Do you have any formula to solve the problems?
Well, my current thinking is as I walk the streets near areas and ask people what they think about the city, when somebody brings up the traffic problems, the first thing I do is ask them if they have any ideas. And a lot of people don't, but some people have some interesting ideas. There's certainly the ability to look at the schools and try to widen out the areas so the cars have more room to get off the road, is one idea that I've heard. We can look into, another idea is to drop students off nearby and either kind of bus them over or walk them over in groups. They call it walking buses. Another idea that I thought was quite good was simply to have a little more of the sheriffs show up and guide traffic through, because one person can deadlock the street for 20 minutes, and trying to keep a little bit better flow there could work. At this point, I don't know that I have the answer. In fact, I'm certain I don't. But I think it is a big problem that affects a lot of people. And I hate to see parents sitting there for 20 minutes waiting in line, not getting to school. Their kids are in the car, their parents are grumpy, they need to get somewhere. I don't think that's a good way for our future leaders to start their school days. So I think it's something we need to look at. And part of the problem is the schools are under one thing, the VTA is another group, and the city owns, and so it's easy for each group to point to the other group and say, well, that's not our responsibility. The city owns the streets, or the VTA owns the transportation, or the schools own the schools, and you can't take care of those. I think those groups need to look at the problem and try to work together and try to make it a little better. I mean, two of the schools do stagger in one area, and that I think helps a lot. And so those are the kind of things that maybe some simple things that can be done to relieve the problem.
Earlier in our discussion, you said that the city government should be more transparent. How would you make that happen?
I think the city government just needs to pay attention to that. For example, Sunnyvale gives out a quarterly report, and in the paper they list things like, here's what our trash costs versus Santa Clara versus Cupertino versus Los Altos, things like that. They also list kind of a summary of the budget. Here's how we are. We were behind budget this year. We're ahead of budget. We have this much surplus. Here's kind of our plans looking forward in terms of what we think we're going to do for the next 10 years. And so it's a very simple thing that gives people some input as to what's going on. I remember at some point we were curious, and Sherry went to look up the budget and didn't know where to find it and this and that. And I finally asked someone, it turns out it is on the Cupertino website, but it downloads very, very slowly. It would take you many, many hours to try to get the budget downloaded, and then if you're not an accountant, you really don't want to go through all that detail. But I think a summary of that would be a useful thing for the people of our city to have. I'm sure they'd like to kind of see where we're all spending our money, and I think they have a right to know that. And so some summary can put that forward in a way that's a little more easy for people to see.
You highlighted on your flyer, said that together we can make the city even a better place to live. The sense of togetherness, do you think if this government is more transparent, it would enhance the sense of togetherness in the city?
Absolutely. I think that, so I've grown up in mixed neighborhoods, so I think I tend to, you were asking me earlier before we started about being a minority. I think I've been minorities in neighborhoods and been the majority in neighborhoods. And even in my own family, I'm kind of the minority. So I sort of have a little bit different perspective on that. And I have a lot of friends in the city that are represent pretty much every race in the city. And a lot of them think that the other guys are prejudiced. And when you talk to those guys, they're not necessarily that way. They just either aren't paying attention or see things differently, or they just do some honest thing for a good reason, and it gets misread by another group of people. So I think things being a little more transparent and open allows us all to see what everyone else is thinking, and I think that helps. Because I don't detect that. When I go and I knock on a door and meet one of the citizens of our community, they don't look at me and go, gee, you're a white guy, go away, or, oh, you're a white guy and I'm a white guy, come in. They basically say, oh, well, what do you have to say? What do you think we should do in the community? So I don't detect a lot of that. I think, first of all, I think if people are really hung up on that, they probably shouldn't be living in Cupertino. They should go live somewhere else. I mean, if you can't tolerate people from other races, you're in the wrong town. Mm-hmm. And I think that for the most part, there isn't a lot of that kind of stuff going on. I think everybody here, they look at their own sets of problems and they see their sets of problems. I mean, with some of the housing things, I think it kind of people look at it as maybe different races, but it's really not. It's people who've lived somewhere for 20 years and they get used to it and you don't like to see it change, versus somebody new who moves in. And it doesn't matter if the new person moves in is from your ethnic background or something different. They're the new person. They pay a lot more for a piece of property. They're going to see things differently. And so I think also in government, things are just a little bit too closed, and the council will make a decision, or government makes a decision, and it's often seen as being for some other reason that it is. And it's really, I think, people trying to do the right thing. But if you make it more transparent, then the citizens can understand that that's what it was, as opposed to something went on behind their back.
Yeah, I thought I asked you about that because you were the only non-Asian candidates for this year. There are 5 Asians. That's why I didn't mean that you were a minority. I just wanted to let you know.
Mr. Santoro, you've announced that you work for the people and you won't take any endorsement from any special interest groups. Does what you mean by special interest groups include media?
That's a really good question. I'm actually struggling with that one right now. I've agreed to meet with groups to talk to them or answer questions, because just because someone's part of a group doesn't mean they don't have a right to understand what you think. So, for example, the League of Women Voters has an event going on which is non-biased, and people get to come and talk to people just like we're doing here, and I think those are good things. That people should all know what the candidates think. They should get honest answers from the candidates, and they should know where you stand. I mean, if somebody doesn't like where I stand on an issue, they should vote for somebody else, but they should get to know where all the candidates stand. So, getting sidetracked here.
Media.
I think so. Getting back to the media, so I've agreed to talk to groups, but I've not agreed to seek their endorsement, and I have refused to take funding from any other groups. I'm struggling with the media because I believe that the media has a right to report the news and attempts to be unbiased, and so that would be the one exception that I may make. And I do know that your paper has asked to speak to me, and I'm seriously considering it, but I'm wrestling with that decision. To the extent the media really is reporting the news and unbiased, I think it's a wonderful and good thing.
Thank you.
Based on your observation on the current council, do you think they have a teamwork there? And if you join the team, will you bring harmony to that, or will you be a good team player?
Interestingly enough, throughout my life, I've often been on the extreme of an argument on one side or another. In this particular election, and given the current city council, on a lot of issues, I'm kind of in the middle, which it's an interesting position for me, but it seems to be where it is. I guess I won't address the city council in terms of how well they play together now. Anybody can watch the city council meetings and make their own judgment. One of the things I did when I was considering running, and even after I filed, was I went and talked to the existing council people to see if they had any strong feelings about me one way or another. And when they asked why I cared, my goal is not to be, I don't want to be one person on the city council always fighting for other people. I want to be one of the 5 people and try to work through issues. That doesn't mean I will agree with the other 4, and I have no qualms about voting 4 to 1 against me, but you at least want to be working with a group of people who don't have any preconceived bias against you, so that you can all work together. And I think pretty much the answer I got from them is they have no issues with me, and that's fine. And so I see myself actually as having a better chance of pulling the council more closely together as opposed to dividing them, and I hope that turns out to be the case.
So have you talked to all the council members?
I have spoken with all the council members.
Wow.
Yes.
So get very good result, huh? They all say, welcome aboard, Mark.
Yeah, each of them have their own thoughts on things, and they don't always agree with me on all issues. I think their main concern is that they have a council person who's going to work for the city and try to be constructive and willing to work with other people, and I'm happy to do that. So,
what's your campaign strategy now? I don't see long signs with your name on it.
So we are printing long signs. They're supposed to be out, I think, today or tomorrow. And so they'll start showing up. We haven't printed as many as other people. We don't want to completely pollute the city with lawn signs, but we'll have a few up so people can see them. My main strategy has been there's a large group of people who have wanted me to run, and so there's a fairly good-sized group of people that go around and knock on doors and pass out flyers and talk to the community, and also I do that a lot as well. I'm tired, my knees hurt, but I think people should get to meet me and know what I think before they vote.
And
So,
you are not taking any donations?
I am not taking any money from any special interest groups. Even if I agree with that special interest group, I don't want to have to feel beholden to them. That's not to say that there are individuals who, if they wish to contribute, may, but not as a group.
So there are individual donations to
Yes.
support you?
Yes.
Mr. Santoro, besides what we've just talked about, do you see any other issues in Cupertino that need to be addressed?
I think for the most part, Cupertino is an excellent city. They don't have a lot of problems. I mean, I grew up in a bad neighborhood, and there, the problems wouldn't be school traffic. The problems would be, can you get to school without somebody, pulling a knife on you or something. And so, within any city, problems change. If you're hungry, you don't have enough food to eat, you're not worried about whether or not you're driving a nice car. You're only worried about enough food to eat. I think
we're at the time when we need to wrap up, so if you could finish up your thoughts about other problems,
Okay.
we'd appreciate it.
I think basically the city is doing pretty good. I think it could use a little bit more image and vision and foresight going forward. And I think really the biggest thing is that it's a pretty good city, but people don't feel as good about it as they should, and part of that's just really communication, I think.
Thank you, Mark
Openness in
Santoro.
government. Sorry.
And Crystal Liu, Mei Wei Huang. To see I hope you are able to see the next edition of Candidate Roundtable. You can check the city website to get broadcast dates and times. Thank you.